In this video, the Skaventide is upon me, and I have a lot of clan rats to paint. Fast. I got a copy of the Skaventide box set, for Warhammer Age of Sigmar 4th edition, sent to me from Games Workshop some time back, a month and a half or so. And it's got a lot of models in it, right? Like 2 forces, Stormcast Eternals and the Skaven. They're pretty good models and are, mostly push fit, and they go together pretty easily. And, just like the Warhammer 40k Leviathan box last year, a portion of the models for each side in this box can make 2 separate Age of Sigmar spearheads, one for each force. Spearhead, if you don't know, it's kind of like Combat Patrol, but for Age of Sigmar. It's smaller armies played on a much smaller board. I decided I wanted to do the Skaven spearhead in comparison to the Storm Bros, which just don't really grab my attention for some reason. Now that said, it's still a pretty decent number of models in that particular group. There's a leader on like a weird rat horse thing, I don't know, and a Grey Seer, an engineer, 3 rat ogres, and then 2 squads of 10 clan rats each. That's a lot of models in that spearhead. It's 26 total in the entire group. To me, that's a lot of models. The last Combat Patrol that I painted was only 10 models. It's the old Dark Angels Combat Patrol that had the Redemptor Dreadnought in it and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of figured I was going to want to get through this whole group of models very quickly. And I knew just how I was going to do it with the clan rats. Now, to begin, I didn't film any of the beginning. I don't know why exactly. I probably should have. I started by obviously building the clan rats, and they go together very simply. They're push fit. Most of them are 2 parts. Maybe there was a couple that might have been 3, but I think it was mostly 2-part models, and they were pretty easy to get together, right? So then after they were built, and then, I put them on the bases, and I put the basing texture on, again, more stuff I didn't film. I then primed them black, which I also didn't film, with my airbrush. Then I airbrushed them a color called Oak Brown from the Army Painter Air colors. And I did a pretty extreme zenithal, right? And I don't mean I put it on really, really heavy. I mean, with a zenithal, you usually leave some shadows and stuff like that. I barely left any shadows. There's a little bit of black primer in some of the, deepest recesses, but predominantly those models were all Oak Brown. And then, after that, I gave them kind of a more normal zenithal from above with Army Painter Air bleached bone, right? This gave them like a decent, normal-looking kind of zenithal for painting over with transparent colors, but it was a warmer zenithal instead of a straight white over black. It was instead more like ivory over brown. After I left the airbrush, it was then time to sit down and put on some very quick skin tones. I used Army Painter Flesh Wash, Soft Tone, and Strong Tones, and I pretty much just slopped it onto the skin parts, like the head and the face, the arms, the feet, that kind of stuff. I'd paint them all with different tones so that they didn't all have exactly the same skin colors. Some guys I would use flesh tone, and some of them I would use the strong, and some I would use the soft tone. It just kind of helps break up the group of them so they don't all look boring and samey, right? I mean, not too much. As those parts dried, I mixed 2 drops of Army Painter Speed Paint Crusader Flesh with 1 drop of Speed Paint Princess Pink. And then I used that color basically on everybody's tails to give them that kind of, pink kind of rat tail thing going on. It's still a little bright at this point, but we're going to fix that later. I then worked on the base colors for their kind of wooden shields and their weapon hafts or staffs or whatever, And for me, it's predominantly almost always Army Painter Speed Paint Dark Wood for that kind of stuff. You could use some other colors for the base of the wood bits if you wanted to sort of vary things up a little bit more, if you wanted to take that time. But it's totally up to you. Again, I'm trying to get through all these clan rats as quickly as possible. So, I could vary the colors later with washes or different types of dry brush colors if I wanted to. But for the base, I'm sticking with that dark wood. It depends on, what you like and what kind of schedule you're on, I suppose. These clan rats are mostly covered in rags, and I wanted, their rags to have some color cohesion, but not be all the exact same colors, right? I assume most Skaven find the materials that become their clothes, and maybe they can dye those things in different colors with like who knows what, kind of probably not anything good. But like the whole group wearing the exact same colors didn't sound right to me. So I picked a bunch of different kind of greenish speed paints, Ghillie Dew, Charming Chartreuse, and Camo Cloak. To sort of tweak some of these colors, I also threw in some Rigor Mortis and some Desolate Brown, for mixing with those previous colors. After I got those parts done and let them dry, I then started working on the other parts of the rags. Some of the figures look like they're kind of dressing in layers, for fashion. And I wanted to pick another color that would work together with the greenish tones that I'd already used, but also be noticeably different as well. I went with browns like Army Painter Speed Paint's Bony Matter, Pallid Bones, and Ochre Clay. And sometimes I mixed in a bit of soft tone or strong tone wash to vary the colors as well. With all the different parts of the rags, done in different colors, but now done and dry, it was now time to base coat all the parts that were going to be metal. I always like to lay down a layer of Army Painter Speed Paint Grim Black before I put down the silver metallics. Then any parts or crevices that I might miss with the silver will then be black shadows, instead of like light colored gaps in the paint. I started with the chainmail bits because they got those little holes in amongst all the chainmail, and that definitely needs to be black for later. And then I did the armor plates, for the ones that have armor. Not everybody, has armor in this group. And then, of course, all the weapon blades as well. At this point, it's now time for the juice. The marine juice, that is. If you haven't heard of marine juice, it is a unifying wash popularized by Sonic Sledgehammer here on YouTube. It's he says he got it from some people that used to work at Forge World, and it was a mixture that they mixed up to paint over Horus Heresy Marines when they had to do a whole bunch of them, right? It's basically a mix of two different washes, usually like a dark color, like a dark tone, and like a flesh wash, and then also some medium to help thin it so it's not so dark. And there's all kinds of different types and recipes that Sledge has talked about on his channel. Pachow, you should definitely subscribe. And this is the one that I've been using here now for about a year. I keep it in a big bottle, and you just take it and just sort of brush it over everything. And make sure not to let it pool too much in any crevices or folds in pants and stuff like that. If it does, just redistribute it with your brush. After everything's dry, I like to dry brush some Army Painter Fanatic Paratrooper Tan on like the Skaven faces to really pop out that detail some more, because there's a lot of detail going on in those faces. It's a brown, a lightish brown that seems to maybe have just a touch of peach color added to it, and it just works really well with Skaven faces in my opinion. Then I use Army Painter Fanatic Leather Brown, dry brushed on the shields and the wooden hafts of the weapons and all that kind of stuff to make that sculpted grain really pop. Again, you could use several different dry brush colors here to make things look different, like different shields, different wood, whatever, or maybe just throw a wash over certain of them, the shields and the weapons or whatever afterwards. To make the metallic parts look, metallic, I then dry brush Army Painter Fanatic Shining Silver onto the little chainmail parts that are sticking out underneath the rags, right? Like they just need a little bit of a dry brush. And in this situation, you're going to need a pretty skinny dry brush to get into these parts. I wouldn't use a makeup brush here. Honestly, I'd probably use like a purpose-made brush for miniatures, but with like a chisel tip kind of dry brush. Here I'm using the Army Painter Small Dry Brush, and it fits perfectly in these areas. Finally, we're on to the bigger metal parts. As I said earlier, some Skaven wear plate armor, and they all pretty much carry weapons, so we'll use the amazing Army Painter Speed Paint Metallics Polished Silver to paint these parts. If you haven't tried the metallic speed paints yet, they're kind of like nothing else. They're like incredibly fluid, but they cover really, really well in one coat. And they also don't leave any brush strokes. Just a very quick swipe of the polished silver color over the armor and the blades, and your metals are sorted. At this point, you're basically done. Well, except for the basing and, the painting of the rims, of course. But once you do that, these rats are ready for the tabletop, and they will look fine. Now, Could you, put a little bit of soft tone wash on the metallics to make them look a little rusty? Sure, yeah, you could, and I did here. Could you also put a little bit of dark tone wash in the mouths to darken them up, and then add a little bit of like ivory, kind of bleached bone or something like that, paint to the teeth as well if you wanted to? Sure, you could, and I did. Could you also paint the eyes? Yes, but I didn't. I really wasn't interested. Speed painting is about planning ahead, cutting some corners that you're okay with, and also the old adage of quantity over quality, usually, right? When you have a lot of rats to paint, or honestly anything else, don't spend golden demon effort on each one, or you'll never get done. Not including like the building and the priming and the zenithal. These 4 Skaven took me about 3.5 hours, and I was filming along as I was doing it. If I had just been like head down, listening to an audiobook and working, I bet these 4 would have taken me less than 3 hours, maybe even closer to 2. Are you looking forward to painting a whole bunch of clan rats in a few weeks? Or maybe you're going to get into the Stormcast half of the Skaventide box. Should I make a how to speed paint Stormcast video? I have some ideas. Let me know down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and maybe, you can share it with your friends who play Skaven. That'd be pretty cool. Also, if you liked this video, or just like it when I do tutorials in general, then, please hit the like button. It helps me and the channel get out to more people. Subscribe to see videos like this every single Friday, and thanks for watching.